Chapter 11. Mixed Emotion. Ha! The author of that cliché didn't even know its meaning. Kenan strode furiously down the dusty road toward Station 1, trying to sublimate his inner conflict into action. It was useless, of course, for once he stopped moving, the grim tug-of-war between training and desire would begin again, and no matter how it ended, the result would be unsatisfactory. As long as he had been able to delude himself that he was fond of Copper, the way a man is fond of some lesser species, it had been all right. But he knew now that he was fond of her as a man is of a woman, and it was hell. For no rationalization in the universe would allow him to define her as human. Copper was humanoid, something like human. And to live with her and love her would not be miscegenation, which was bad enough, but bestiality, which was 1,000 times worse. Although throughout most of the Brotherhood, miscegenation was an unknown word, and even bestiality had become a loose definition on many worlds with humanoid populations, the words had definite meaning and moral force to a beaten. And God help him, he was a beaten. A lifetime of training in a moral code that frowned upon mixed marriages and shrank appalled from even the thought of mixing species was nothing to bring face to face with the fact that he loved Copper. It was odd, Kenan reflected bitterly, that humans could do with animals what their customs and codes prohibited them from doing to themselves. For thousands of years, back to the very dawn of history, when men had bred horses and asses to produce mules, men had been mixing species to produce useful hybrids. Yet a beaten who could hybridize plants or animals with complete equanimity shrank with horror from the thought of applying the same technique to himself. What was there about a human being that was so sacrosanct? He shook his head angrily. He didn't know. There was no answer. But the idea, the belief, was there, ingrained in his attitudes, a part of his outlook, built carefully block by block from infancy until it now towered into a mighty wall that barred him from doing what he wished to do. It would be an easier hurdle if he had been born anywhere except on Beta. In the rest of the Brotherhood, the color of a man's skin, the shape of his face, the quality and color of his hair and eyes made no difference. All men were brothers. But on Beta, where a variant as son had already caused genetic divergence, the Brotherhood of Man was a term that was merely given lip service. Beatons were different, and from birth they were taught to accept the difference and to live with it. Mixing of beaten stock with other human species, while not actually forbidden, was so encircled with conditioning that it was a rare beaten indeed who would risk self-opprobrium and the contempt of his fellows to mate with an outsider. And as for humanoids, Kenan shuddered. He couldn't break the attitudes of a lifetime, yet he loved Copper. And she knew he did, and that was an even greater horror. He had fled from the office, from the glad light in her eyes, as a burnt child flees fire. He needed time to think, time to plan. Yet his body and his surface thoughts wanted no plans or time. Living with a Lani wasn't frowned upon on Flora. Many of the staff did, nor did anyone seem to think less of them for doing so. Even Alexander himself had half confessed to a more than platonic affection for a Lani called Susie. Yet this was no excuse, nor would it silence the cold, still voice in his mind that kept repeating sodomite, 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 with a passionless inflection that was even more terrible than anger. The 5 kilometers to Station 1 disappeared unnoticed beneath his feet as he walked, and he looked up in surprise to see the white walls and red roofs of the station looming before him. "Good Lord, Doc, what's got into you?" the station master said. "You look like you'd seen a ghost, and out in this sun without a helmet. Come inside, man, before you get sunstroke." Kenan chuckled without humor. "Getting sunstroke is the least of my worries, Al," he said, but he allowed Al Crothers to usher him inside. "It's odd that you showed up right now," Al said, his dark face showing the curiosity that filled him. "I just had a call from Message Center not 5 minutes ago, telling me to have you call in if you showed up." Kenan sighed. "On this island, you can't get away from the phone," he said wryly. "Okay, where is it?" "You look pretty bush, Doc. Maybe you'd better rest a while." "And maybe it's an emergency," Kenan interrupted, "and probably it is because the staff can handle routine matters, so maybe you'd better show me where you keep the phone." "1 moment, please," the message center operator said. There were a few clicks in the background. "Here's your party," she continued. "Go ahead, doctor." "Kenan?" A nervous voice crackled from the receiver. "Yes?" "You're needed out on Otpen 1. "Who was calling and what's the rush?" "Douglas Alexander. The Lani are dying. It's an emergency. Cousin Alex'll skin us alive if we let these Lani die." Douglas! Kenan hadn't thought of him since the one time they had met in Alexandria. That was a year ago. It seemed much longer. Since the boss man had exiled his cousin to that bleak rock to the east of Flora, there had been no word of him. And now, he laughed a sharp bark of humorless annoyance. Douglas couldn't have timed it better if he had tried. "All right, I'll come. What seems to be the trouble?" "They're sick." "That's obvious," Kenan snapped. "Otherwise you wouldn't be calling. Can't you tell me any more than that?" "They're vomiting. They have diarrhea. Several have had fits." "Thanks," Kenan said. "I'll be right out. Expect me in an hour." "So you're leaving?" Al asked as he cradled the phone. "That's a practitioner's life," Kenan said, full of interruptions. "Can I borrow your Jeep?" "I'll drive you. Where do you want to go?" "To the hospital," Kenan said. "I'll have to pick up my gear. It's an emergency, all right." "You're a tough one," Al said admiringly. "I'd hate to walk 5 kilos in this heat without a hat and then go out on a call." Kenan shrugged. "It's not necessarily toughness. I believe in doing one job at a time, and my contract reads veterinary service, not personal problems. The job comes first, and there's work to do." Copper wasn't in sight when Kenan came back to the hospital, a fact for which he was grateful. He packed quickly, threw his bags into the Jeep, and took off with almost guilty haste. He'd contact the hospital from the Otpens. Right now, all he wanted was to put distance between himself and Copper. Absence might make the heart grow fonder, but at the moment, proximity was by far the more dangerous thing. He pointed the blunt nose of the Jeep toward Mount Olympus, set the autopilot, opened the throttle, and relaxed as best he could as the little vehicle sped at top speed for the outer islands. A vague curiosity filled him. He'd never been on the Otpens. He wondered what they were like. Otpen 1 was a rocky, tree-clad islet crowned with the stellated mass of a Class II fortalice. But this one wasn't like Alexandria. It was fully manned and in service condition. "Airboat," a voice crackled from the dashboard speaker of the Jeep. "Identify yourself. You are being tracked." Kenan quickly flipped the IFF switch. "Dr. Kenan, from Flora," he said. "Thank you, sir. You are expected and are clear to land. Bring your vehicle down in the marked area." A section of the roof turned a garish yellow as Kenan circled the building. He brought the Jeep in lightly, setting it carefully in the center of the area. "Leave your vehicle," the speaker chattered. "If you are armed, leave your weapon behind." "It's not my habit to carry a gun," Kenan snapped. "Sorry, sir. Regulations," the speaker said. "This is SOP." Kenan left the Jeep and instantly felt the probing tingle of a search beam. He looked around curiously at the flat roof of the fortress, with its domed turrets and ugly snouts of the main battery projectors pointing skyward. Beside him, the long metal doors of a missile launcher made a rectangular trace on the smooth surface of the roof. Behind him, the central tower poked its gaunt ferromorphin durlium outline into the darkening sky, bearing its crown of spiderweb radar antennas turning steadily on their gimbals, covering a vast hemisphere from horizon to zenith with endless inspection. From the base of the tower, a man emerged. He was tall, taller even than Kenan, and the muscles of his body showed the tightness of his battle dress. His face was harsh, and in his hands he carried a Burkholz Magnum, the most powerful portable weapon mankind had yet devised. "You are Dr. Kenan?" the trooper asked. "I am." "Your ID, please." Kenan handed it over, and the big man scanned the card with practiced eyes. "Check," he said. "Follow me, sir." "My bags. They'll be taken care of." Kenan shrugged and followed the man into the tower. A modern grav shaft lowered them to the ground floor. They passed through a gloomy caricature of the Great Hall in Alexandria, through an iris, and down a long corridor lined with doors. A bell rang. "Back," the trooper said. "Against the wall. Quick, into the doorway." "What's up?" Another practice alert. The trooper's voice was bored. "It gets so that you'd almost wish for a fight to relieve the monotony." A trooper and several Lani came down the corridor, running in disciplined formation. Steel clanged on steel as they turned the corner, and moments later the whine of servos came faintly to their ears. From somewhere deep in the pile, a rising crescendo of generators under full battle load sent out vibrations that could be sensed rather than heard. A klaxon squawked briefly. There was another clash of metal, and a harsh voice boomed through the corridors. 14 seconds. Well done. Secure stations. The trooper grinned. That ties the record, he said. We can go now. The corridor ended abruptly at an iris flanked by 2 sentries. They conferred briefly with Kennan's guide, dilated the iris, and motioned for Kennan to enter. The pastel interior of the modern office was a shocking contrast to the gray ferromorph corridors outside. Douglas Alexander was standing behind the desk. He was much the same. His pudgy face was haggard with uncertainty, and his eyes darted back and forth as his fingers caressed the knobby grip of a small Burkholz jutting from a holster at his waist. There were new, unpleasant furrows between his eyes. He looked older, and the indefinable air of cruelty was more pronounced. Kennan clipped him on the chin with a driving knee, snapping George's head back and smashed the bearded face with the shackles. Blood spurted, and George screamed with rage. One of the Lani's big hands wrapped around the shackles and tugged. Kennan let go and drove another left to George's ribs. The Lani threw the irons at Kennan, but his aim was poor. One of the handcuff rings scraped across Kennan's cheek, but did nothing more than break the skin. Half paralyzed by the blows to his solar plexus, George's coordination was badly impaired, but he kept trying. Kennan wrapped lean fingers about one of George's outstretched hands, bent, pivoted, and slammed the Lani with bone-crushing force against the bars of a nearby cell. But George didn't go down. He's more brute than man, Kennan thought. No man could take a beating like that. He moved aside from George's stumbling rush, feeling a twinge of pity for the battered humanoid. It was no contest. Strong as he was, George didn't know the rudiments of hand-to-hand fighting. His reactions were those of an animal, to close, clutch, bite, and tear. Even if he were completely well, the results would have been the same. It would merely have taken longer. Kennan drove a vicious judo chop to the junction of the Lani's neck and shoulder. Brute strength was no match for the highly evolved mayhem that every spaceman learns as a necessary part of his trade. George had never been on planet leave in a spaceport town. He knew nothing about the dives, the crimps, the hostile port police. His idea of fighting was that of a beast, but Kennan was a civilized man to whom fighting was an art perfected by millennia of warfare. And Kennan knew his trade. Even so, it took longer than Kennan expected because George was big, George was strong, and George had courage and pride that kept him coming as long as the blazing will behind his blazing eyes could drive his battered body. But the end was inevitable. Kennan looked at his bloody arm where George's teeth had reached their mark. It was hardly more than a scratch, but it had been close. George had his lesson, and Kennan felt oddly degraded. He sighed, dragged George back into the cell, and locked the door. Then he turned to Douglas. The howls of hate from the caged Lani died to a sullen silence as Kennan gently examined the limp body. Douglas wasn't dead. His neck was dislocated, not broken, but he was in serious condition. Kennan was still bending over Douglas, wondering how to call for help, when 3 guards burst through the door, faces grim, weapons at the ready. "What's going on here?" the leader demanded. "The board showed an open door down here." He saw the body. "Mr. Douglas," he gasped, "the commandant will have to know about this." He took a communicator from his waist belt and spoke rapidly into it. "Arlson in stud cell block," he said. "Attempted escape. 1 casualty, Douglas Alexander. Yes, that's right. No, he's not dead. Send a litter and bearers. Inform the commandant. I am making investigation on the spot. Out." He turned to look coldly at Kennan. "Who are you, and what happened here?" he asked. Kennan told him. "You mean you took George," Arlson said. "Look in his cell if you don't believe me." The soldier looked and then turned hack to Kennan. There was odd respect in his hard brown eyes. "You did that? To him? Man, you're a fighter," he said in an unbelieving voice. A stretcher detail manned by 2 sober-faced Lani females came in, loaded Douglas's body on the stretcher, and silently bore it away. Douglas was a fool, Arlson said. He knew we never handle this kind without maximum restraint. I wonder why he did it. I couldn't say. He told me that gas and shackles would hold him. He knew better. These Lani know gas capsules. All George had to do was hold his breath. In that cell, George would have killed you. You couldn't have stayed away from him. Kennan shrugged. Maybe that was what Douglas had wanted. Kennan sighed. He didn't have the answer. And it could just be that Douglas had tried to show off. Well, he would pay for it. He'd have a stiff neck for months, and perhaps that was a proper way to end it. XX. Commander Mullins, a thin, gray-faced man with the hard, cold eyes of a professional soldier, came into the corridor followed by another trooper. His eyes took in the wreckage that had been George, the split lips, the smashed nose, the puffed eyes, the cuts and bruises, and then raked across Kennan. "Spaceman, hey?" he asked. "I've seen work like that before." Kennan nodded. "I once was. I'm station veterinarian now. Douglas called me over, said it was an emergency." Mullins nodded. "Well, why aren't you tending to it?" "I have to examine them," Kennan said, gesturing at the cells. "And I don't want any more trouble like this." "Don't worry, you won't have it. Now that you've beaten George, you'll have no trouble at all. You're top dog." Mullins gestured at the cages. "They'll be good for a while. Now you'd better get on with your work. There's been enough disruption of routine for today. The men will help you." XX. Kennan checked in at the commandant's office before he left for the main island. "How is Douglas?" he asked. "He's alive," Mullins said. "We flew him to Albertsville, and good riddance. How are the Lani?" "They'll be all right," Kennan said. "It's just food poisoning. I suggest you check your kitchen and your food handlers. There's a break in sanitation that could incapacitate your whole command. I found a few things wrong, but there are probably more." "I'll check on it, and thanks for the advice," Mullins said. "Sit down, Doctor. Your airboat won't be serviced for another few minutes. Tell me how things are on the main island. How's Blalock?" "You know him?" "Of course. I used to be a frequent visitor there. But with that young pup here, I couldn't leave. I dared to. He'd have disrupted routine in a single day. Look what he did in half an hour. Frankly, I owe you a debt for getting him off my hands." Mullins chuckled dryly. "That's a fine thing to say," Kennan grinned. "But I can sympathize. It took us 2 months to straighten out Alexandria after the boss man sent him here." "I heard about that." "Well, we're under control now. Things are going pretty smoothly." "They'll be better here," Mullins said. He shrugged. "I hope the boss doesn't send him back. He's hard to handle, and he makes discipline a problem." "Could you tell me, or would it be violating security?" Kennan said. "Why do you have a Class 2 installation on full warfare out here?" Mullins chuckled. "It's no secret," he said. "There was a commercial raid on this place about 50 years ago. Seems as though one of our competitors didn't like us. Alexandria was on a warfare then and managed to hold them off, but it scared the old man. You see, our competitive position is based on Lani labor. Our competitors didn't know that. Their intelligence wasn't so good. Up until that time, we'd been keeping the males out here in what was hardly more than a stockade. Those people could have taken a few dozen females and a couple of males, and they'd be in business. But they didn't know. They tried to smash Alexandria instead. Naturally, they didn't have a chance. And after it was over, the old man got smart. He still had the tapes for Alexandria, so he built a duplicate out here and spent a few millions on modern armament. The way we're set now, it'd take a battle group to hurt us." "But how about security? Don't the others know about the Lani now?" "It's a moot question, but it won't do them any good. They can't crack this place, and without males, all the females on Flora wouldn't do them enough long-term good to pay for the force they'd need to be successful. So that's why the males are isolated. There's another reason, 2 of them in fact. One is physical. Even the best male is a dangerous beast. They have a flair for violence that makes them useless as labor, and their training doesn't help matters. And the other is mental. The females on the main island believe that we humans are responsible for the continuation of their breed. This tends to keep them in line. We have a great deal more trouble with them out here once they know the truth. We've had a number of cases of females trying to engineer a male's escape. But they're never repeated," Mullins said grimly. Actually, it would be an interesting life out here, except for the abattoir. He grimaced. That's an unpleasant chore. You mean, Kennan said. Why, certainly. What else could we do with senile animals? But that's murder. Mullen shook his head. No more than killing a cow for beef. You know, Kennan said, I've never thought of what happened to aged Lani. Sure, I've never seen one, but Lord Lister, I'm a fool. You'll get used to the idea, Mullen said. They aren't human, and except for a few, they're not as intelligent as a Santosian Varl. I know that they look like us except for those tails, but that's as far as it goes. I've spent 200 years with them, and I know what I'm talking about. That's what Alexander says. He should know. He's lived with them all his life. Well, perhaps, but I'm not convinced. Neither was old Doc, not until the day he died. Did he change them? I don't know. I wasn't there. But old Doc was a stubborn cuss. Kennan stood up. I've given instructions for treatment to your corpsemen, he said. Now I think I'd better be getting back. I have some reports to finish. Mullen smiled grimly. You know, he said, I get the feeling that you don't approve of this operation. Frankly, I don't, Kennan said, but I signed a contract. He turned toward the door and gestured to the two Lani who waited outside with his bags. I can find my way to the roof, he said. Well, good luck, Mullen said. We'll call you again if we need you. Do that, Kennan replied. He wanted to leave, to get away from this place and back to the main island. He wanted to see Copper. He'd be damned if anyone was going to butcher her. If he had to stay here until she died of old age, he'd do it. But nobody was going to hurt her.